Welcome to the bike lane. The Spring Classics have finished. They wrapped up on the weekend with Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and Dan Martin collected the biggest win of his career. We take a close look at the Spring Classics. And as many riders are taking a mid-season break, the third place finisher from the Tour of Flanders, Jurgen Roelandts, is in Australia to recharge his batteries. We catch up with the big Belgian. And in the Target Healthy Living tips, Dr. Mitch Anderson drops by to give us a few pointers on how to improve your post-ride recovery. And most importantly, we deal with what's on your mind. I'm Matt Keenan, he's Scott McGrory, an 8-time Australian champion, and Will Walker is joining us in place of Wade Wallace, former Australian road champion. We're at the Salford Lads Club. Let's roll. With Wade Wallace away, he's been replaced by Will Walker. Many of you probably know Will, former Australian champion, spent a number of years at the top level of the sport, riding with Rabobank. So Will, firstly, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, Matt.
Thought we'd take the chance to pick your brain a little bit. Last week, Scott, we spoke about Cadel Evans. That was raised on the feedback that we had from viewers. And you concluded that Aldo Sassi, since he passed away, Cadel is really missing him.
Well, I suggested that, didn't I? And you are a man that certainly knew Aldo very well, and also Cadel. But do you think that is the case, that since Aldo has passed, that he really has missing someone, that mentor role?
I think that's completely correct. Aldo, you know, not many people obviously got to know him like I did, but he was a really powerful man. Everybody was just, you know, so scared of him, basically, and he was so powerful that everybody listened to exactly what he had to say with training, with preparation, with everything. So I think for a period after Aldo passed away, Cadel rose to the occasion, wanted to win the Tour de France for Aldo, but then from then on, I think he's feeling slightly, you know, out of place without him.
You had a right to be scared of him because you're engaged to his daughter. So every future son-in-law should be scared of the father-in-law, so you're allowed to be scared of him. I also suggested last week that Cadel was past his best when he won the Tour de France. That physically he was better a few years before that, but it's the other elements around him that came together that enabled him to win the Tour.
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation. It's one that's hard to sort of, you know, determine because, you know, you see the race every year, but actually Aldo used to tell me categorically that he got heavier. His powder weight was slightly worse in the later years, and that, you know, he was actually better in the, you know, early 2000s. Obviously his results at the Tour de France were worse in those occasions, but that was for different reasons. So, you know, if Cadel Evans was born or was a 20-year-old now, he would be a many-time Tour de France winner, and I think everybody knows that.
He's preparing now for the Giro. He looked okay in Trentino recently. He finished in 8th place. What are your expectations at the Giro d'Italia?
Well, I don't know. It's obviously not his #1 name for the season. I think a top 10 would be normal Cadel. A good Cadel, you know, he could win it. Going up against Bradley Wiggins, who's obviously there to be on his top of his game, will be obviously hard to beat for Cadel. It was certainly sad to miss him at the Classics. You know, Flesh Wallone, I think Cadel needs in the bag, but the Tour de France this year, you know, Cadel's going to be there in Hungary.
Well, Vincenzo Nibali is another one that's fully focusing on the Giro d'Italia as well. So Wiggins, Nibali, not sure if Cadel's going to be quite there. And look, we've asked the question of ourselves the last week as well. Why is he riding the Giro? You know, if he's focusing on the Tour, why do you think that he's trying to do both?
I think he must have been sick in the last month. So, you know, he's probably just a little bit further behind than he wants to be, maybe slightly heavier, and he just wants to use the Giro as good preparation. You know, a rider like Cadel can go into it, you know, not expecting to race really hard and come out of it really strong. When
you've got that class, you can get better. We're going to put you on the spot. I'm sure a lot of you are well aware of Michael Rasmussen and his recent confessions. You were a teammate of Rasmussen, so we're going to give you some simple yes-no questions, and you're entitled to a think so, I think so, or a maybe. So yes or no?
Let's go.
Did you ride a Giro d'Italia as a teammate of Michael Rasmussen?
Yes, definitely.
Did you share a room with Rasmussen in that Giro?
I was his roommate, yes.
Were there any nights where you had the room to yourself?
There were a few nights where he required his own room, but I can't determine why.
Was that because you snore, yes or no?
It could be, but I don't know. You never know if you snore yourself, do you?
The days after he didn't share a room with you, was he faster on the bike?
Well, his results in that Giro did increase, but it would be impossible to determine whether.
These are very long yes or no answers, Will. Did you ever speak to him about doping?
No, actually, that's one really respectable thing. From the outside of cycling, it looks like that's all everybody talks about. But, I shared a room with him in the Giro for, 20-something days. And, he did not once speak to me about it, didn't insinuate anything. And, looking at it from the outside, that's a really good thing because there's 2 young Aussie guys on his team now in Denmark. And, I could sit here and say that they wouldn't have any issues or wouldn't come across doping with his team.
Okay, then another one of the burning questions coming out of the Rabobank team of that era. Michael Bogard also confessed, but were his teeth real?
I don't know that, but looking at them, you wouldn't think so. And having seen his wife, there were also parts of her that weren't 100% real either.
Michael Bogard, his teeth do look expensive. And Michael Rasmussen, interesting insight from Will Walker. This is your segment, What's on Your Mind, as we give away the prize courtesy of Champion Systems. But we start with an honourable mention. The question was put to us about bike maintenance. How far should you go? How much should you be able to do? And how far do you rely on the local bike shop? Will and Scott, you've both had the opportunity to ride on pro teams. How lazy did you get as a result of having a full-time mechanic?
Well, in my experience, if I go back to being when I was a kid, I used to pull my bike completely apart after almost every race, right down to cleaning every individual ball bearing. Perhaps I was a little bit obsessed.
You were.
I was. As I became a professional, it was more spray it with degreaser, go past the high-pressure hose at the car wash.
And there's nothing WD-40 can't fix.
Yeah, I agree with that. When I first got into cycling, I built my own bike, learned how to glue singles. Towards the end, every year I did less and less, and I'm pretty much with you on the bike washing thing.
Bike shops are dependent, though, on people new to the sport not knowing how to fix that stuff, because that's where they can actually make some money, because you can't buy that on Wiggle. So they're really dependent on it. And I'm of the view that if you can afford to go and get your bike fixed, why would you get dirty fingers? Why not go and get it fixed?
I certainly do not recommend just degreaser and car wash, because while it's a professional's bike, we give it back at the end of the year. They sell it off to some unfortunate person. But meanwhile, almost after every race, we're blowing all of the grease and everything out of that bike. So I wouldn't buy an ex-professional's bike.
And your brother, Johnny, he rode the Tour of Spain, cannot change a puncher.
Yeah, we're out this morning. It took him 15 minutes and he couldn't get the tyre over the rim. So he's hopeless. But look, in my opinion, you should start to learn as much as you can, because one day you're going to be out on the road in trouble. And secondarily, you want to know your equipment. It's really an extension of yourself on the bike. So knowing all the little bits and pieces and how they work.
Okay, the winner of the prize, though, the person that gets the Champion System winter jacket, is Shane in Adelaide, who has asked a question that many of you have asked about those ugly helmets. The Giro stack hat, separated at birth. I got a Christmas present in about 1987 with a stack hat, and I figured that was just a non-Christmas present. That was a loss. I was devastated. But the stack hat now is industrial design. It's aerodynamic. Maybe we should revert.
No, I don't think we should. But look, I understand why they've come back, because it is all about aerodynamics and those marginal gains, and Team Sky have really led the way in the past with that. We saw Mark Cavendish win a World Championships with the cover, fully covered.
He's got a lot to answer
helmet.
for.
He does. Perhaps we should blame it on him. So I understand why, but they're just not very attractive.
Would you wear one?
Look, at the moment I wouldn't. I hate having a hot head, and I can imagine that the ventilation is pretty poor. But if you're pushing 30 watts less for the whole day, then that's a sizable amount. That's, might be 10% over the whole day, and that can make a huge difference.
It's worth looking ugly.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean,
yeah. And then you can look pretty on the podium with a cycling cap on, as opposed to the baseball cap that we're seeing at the moment. But you have been guilty a long time ago. Nothing is new. This is just a rehash of one of your old helmets.
It is. I've actually gone into my mother's shed up in Rutherglen and pulled, you can even see my name on it, McGrory, an old Headway helmet that looks very modern all of a sudden for some strange reason.
So we've gone from, you're afraid to put it on, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, I know it's been
enough.
sitting in a shed for 15, 20 years or something. Yeah.
It looks a little bit crusty. So Shane in Adelaide, you get the Champion Systems jersey, courtesy of being able to pick that everybody wants to talk about those ugly helmets. Keep the suggestions coming in. All the ones that we've collected, we've logged, and we'll be back with more next week with What's on Your Mind. Liège-Bastogne-Liège on the weekend saw the Spring Classics wrap up, and it was the Irishman Dan Martin who collected the biggest win of his career. But it was a win for the team as much as anything else. The Garmin Sharp squad, the way Ryder Hagedal performed was extraordinary, but this is a team with one of the smallest budgets in the World Tour, and in the last 12 months, they've won a Grand Tour and a Monument. What is it about this team?
I think it all comes down to team culture. You know, you've got a team there with Garmin, and they follow the riders, they try to get the most out of them, they pick up the phone and they just say, how are you feeling? All these little things make it so much easier for a rider to perform. Whereas, you've got the money-orientated approach of BMC, and throwing money at the problem in cycling, it doesn't work.
You're dealing with humans, not computers. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting actually, because BMC actually bought Alan Piper across from Garmin to try and actually put that infrastructure in place, almost like a Team Sky is what they were trying to do. But again, just going out there and throwing money to try and solve a problem.
It's not solving the problem at BMC, that's for sure. And Jonathan Vaughters has got pretty good talent ID. The next one we want to look at from Liège is Team Sky. They have not been able to transfer that formula from the Tours across to the Spring Classics.
Yeah, look, I think there's probably, with the Spring Classics early on, some of their Tour de France riders are their Spring Classics riders, so they've got two aims through the season, which makes it difficult. But I think it's a good thing that they didn't perform at that top level. It, makes everything look, like it's a competitive, playing field, pro cycling. It's not just one team that dominates.
And they've shown human fragility.
Oh, look, absolutely. I think that it's very difficult to try and be everything, and they're doing their tour preparation very well. We see it with Richie Port winning races, Henao and around all these guys up there as well. And we'll also see Froome and Wiggins, no doubt, once we get to the Grand Tours. So they're doing that extraordinarily well. And I think it also shows that the unpredictability of the Classics. You can't put that formula into a Classic.
A lot of dirt has been thrown at Team Sky because they've been so successful, and accusations about doping. And I think their lack of success in the Spring Classics, in relative terms, probably reflects well on their reputation. Because if you go onto YouTube and you search the 1994 Flèche Wallonne, you'll find Flèche Wallonne 1994 in brackets Gay Whiz EPO attack, where they went the 1, 2, 3 and they rode everybody off the wheel. Yeah. They then dominated the Giro as well. I think this is a positive thing for the reputation at Team Sky. They don't have to answer too many questions. Speaking of reputations, one guy whose reputation has been on the line is Andy Schleck, but he's showing signs of improvement.
I want him out. I don't like Andy Schleck. He doesn't perform, his good years, which we say, oh, Andy was good that year, he does a Tour de France result and that's it. We've got a guy, Cadel Evans, that every single race he goes in, he's performing well, and that's a classy rider.
You raced against him, Andy Schleck?
I'm exactly the same age as him. I raced with him at the juniors, Junior World Championships, under 23s. His first Giro was my first Giro, and
he finished second. Where did you finish?
I got tired halfway through. Really tired. He didn't. And he's a great rider, but I don't like his, the way he approaches cycling. He's a bit wimpy. I prefer to see these Dan Martins, the hard men of the world, that come up.
Will Walker not sitting on the fence. We wait to see if Andy Schleck can get back. Next up, we're going to review shortly the Spring Classics. Given the Spring Classics are finished, we're going to take a look at some of the highlights and the lowlights. But first up, a little bit of the tipping. Dan Martin's win at Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Nobody predicted it with the exception of Brett Sweeney, who sent me a message on Facebook saying Martin would win, and I laughed at him. Who's laughing now? And you, Scott McGrory, you win our little tipping competition. Well out in front and first, Wade Wallace second. I've got the Lanterne Rouge. Lucky I'm not a gambler, Will.
You need help.
I need help. Highlights and lowlights from the Spring Classics. You go first.
Well, I'm a patriot, so we did Orica Green Edge and the Australians didn't win a Classic this year. Milan-San Remo last year, obviously with Gerrans. It was the year before that, Goss won it. We didn't get one, but Simon Gerrans finishing third in Amstel, so up on the podium there. So I'll take that as a victory for Australia. And as a low light, I'm actually going to pick the nation of Belgium collectively, because it's close to 60 years since a Belgian has actually won a Classic.
They missed Tom Bonen.
They certainly did. Look, Jurgen Roelandts, who is on the show this week, he finished third in Flanders, so it was a great result. But if you look at
Australia,
the stats,
maybe escaping the scrutiny.
and that would be outrageous over there. They would have really come down heavy on them in the newspapers in Belgium.
It's like football coverage.
Yeah, absolutely. But look, perhaps it shows that I guess the sport is becoming a lot more global and the Belgians can't dominate on their home ground.
Yet everybody that won a classic was from Europe.
Yeah, you had to point that out.
Yeah.
That is true.
Your highlights and lowlights?
Highlight for me was definitely a professional continental team, the new team from Africa, winning Milan-San Remo, and a rider also with that sort of been away from fame for a few years, being a domestique. He was at 20, German champion. I think at 21 or 22, he's world under 23 champion.
It looked like his career was just about gone. He was under 23 world champion the year after you were the silver medalist. Seeing his result, does it give you hope that you can get back to that level?
Look, I didn't make a direct comparison. It does give me some little bit of hope, but it was just great seeing a team with a fantastic cause, a new team from Africa, their first Pro Tour monument, and they won.
It was a great, great start.
It's a fairy tale story.
Nobody tipped him either, not even Brett Sweeney. What was your low light?
My low light was definitely the lack of competition at the cobbled classics. I mean, I think cycling needs to see 9 or 10, top contenders going for it on the cobbles, not just, Sagan versus Cancellara. That's a footy match, 2 teams, 1 winner.
Well, my highlight was the complete reverse to that. It was the unpredictability throughout the Ardennes. Really, who would have expected Dan Martin to win Liège? I certainly didn't. And Kreuziger to win the Amstel Gold Race. And going back earlier with Milan-San Remo, the prospect of actually seeing Cholik win, never thought it was going to happen. But my low light was on the pavé as well. What are they doing to the Tour of Flanders? Yes, it's still called the Tour of Flanders and it's still a bike race, but it's the equivalent to calling South Australia versus the Northern Territory state of origin. It's not. That's New South Wales versus Queensland. They are spoiling the history of that race.
Turning it into a big cobbled kermesse, aren't they?
It's all about money. It's about the VIP tents. Leave the Tour of Flanders alone. Bring back the Mur, please. Now that the Spring Classics are done and dusted, a lot of riders are taking a mid-season break, like Greg Henderson. He's gone to Colorado for the snow, but third from the Tour of Flanders, Jurgen Roelandts, has come to Australia, and we caught up with him earlier this week. So Jurgen, we're in the middle of the season. You're taking a little bit of a break, and what brings you here to Australia?
Well, I have a big break after the Spring Classics, and since shortly I have like an Australian girlfriend, so that's why I'm here. Yeah.
It was a fantastic spring campaign for you, in third place at the Tour of Flanders. That must have been a great moment. What were the emotions like on the podium?
Like during the race, the team did an amazing effort already. We were always really into the race, and then I already told before, like the only moment you could go was after the pater the second time. So yeah, I just played 100% there, and eventually it worked out really well at the legs, and it was the right move to do at that moment, and I could just make it over the Kwaremond before Cancellara and Peters again, and then that was just giving everything last time Paterberg, and hoped I could stick with one of those 2 riders. Yeah.
When you were coming to the finish with Peter Sagan, 2 up racing for second position, did you think you had a chance of getting the better of him?
Yeah, well, of course you want to be on the podium like Cancellara. He was riding so fast, but then in first case you're riding for the podium, you try to stay in front, and then once you get into the last K, I wanted to go for second place, of course, but I think the legs were a bit empty at the end.
The Tour of Flanders told us a lot about the morale within your team, and seeing a guy like Andre Greipel do the job for you. Tell us a little bit about the bond between the squad.
Yeah, it's nice because firstly he was not scheduled on these races, and then he said I want to do them for you because you already did a great job for me this year and last year, like for the lead-out train in the sprint. So it's really nice seeing a guy like him, or like even all the other guys working for me, and that's giving a mental boost. Yeah.
Come the Tour de France, it will be Lotto Belisol with Greipel and Omega Pharma Quickstep with Mark Cavendish going head-to-head. Tom Bonen will be in the mix as a lead-out man as well. How are you going to manage to beat them?
We'll see. Like the train on the Omega Pharma Quickstep team isn't working yet properly. Like it's working like with us 2 years ago, and we got it on track last year. Really good. And then we're just so like stick together, and we know what to do at which time, so that's an advantage for us. But I think Bonen will be maybe a key for Cavendish in the Tour. Yeah, so we'll see.
So how will Greg Henderson cope with that? Because at the moment he's probably the world's best lead-out man, Greg Henderson.
Yeah.
Now he's going to be challenged for that status by Tom Boonen. It's going to be hard to compete with Tom.
Yeah, it's going to be hard, but I always think like when we come into the last K and Seaberg starts, it's really hard to come next to us till like Andre starts with 200 to go. So if we get there, yeah, then we'll see. But yeah, just the last K, you know. But you have Boonen and Cavendish, but you also need the guy in front of Boonen, and that's also really important.
And that's your role as well.
Yeah, that's my role. Like I go sometimes from 800, 700 till 400, inside 400 sometimes. So yeah, you need like a Seaberg is really important for doing these things. He sees everything. He's big. He's tall. Like he has a good overview, and like he knows when to start. Is really like one of our key.
So he's in the tower calling the shots, so you can see everything
like
more clearly.
Sometimes when I'm in a peloton, I'll just ask, when I'm looking for somebody, I just ask CB, like, you seen this guy? Like, he mostly knows obviously if he's in the front or in the back. Yeah.
Vastly different scenario for you this year than what it was last year, where you had a number of horrible accidents. Take us through a few of the hurdles that you had to overcome.
Yeah, last year in January, first stage into the under, I crashed pretty badly. I broke my 6th neck vertebra. So I was 2 days in hospital already there, like I had to put up with a neck brace for 6 weeks. But then 4 weeks later, because a vein was hitting my neck, I had a brain stroke in the little brains, like the cerebellum. It actually was really bad because like I lost a bit of my sense of vision, my sense of balance. So I had a really difficult period, like it took me 3 months to get back on a decent level. And yeah, it was eventually, I did good training, and eventually it was really good. I could do the Tour de France, and it brought me back on a really high level.
Has that experience made you tougher mentally?
It made me tougher mentally. It made me look a bit different to life also. Like I take like decisions more quickly, more at 100% and not at 98%.
And Anzac Day, you're going to get the opportunity to go and watch the Anzac Day clash between Essendon and Collingwood. What do you make of AFL football?
Yeah, it will be nice. So Essendon is leading the classement, I saw, so it will be nice. Like they said, it's really, except for like really the big matches, the nicest match to see, or one of the nicest games to see in the year. So I'm looking forward to it.
Football?
It's really tough. Like it's really hard, and yeah, respect to these guys.
Enjoy the match, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
The next time we'll really see Jurgen Roelandts in action is at the Tour de France, where he'll be part of the lead-out train for Andre Greipel. It'll be Greipel versus Cavendish, Lotto versus Quickstep. Who wins?
I think they'll pretty much be a bit of a mixed bag, but I think Cavendish will come out on top.
I'm going for Greipel at the start. They'll have their lead train really dialed, but then once the Tour gets underway and Cavendish finds his legs, he'll win all the rest.
And who'll be the world's best lead-out man? Greg Henderson or Tom Boonen?
I think Henderson. He's honed into that job, and I think for Tom Boonen, he hasn't done the lead out in the same way as Hendo. It's
a different skill.
Time it is.
What do you think?
He's been out of the bunch sprints for quite a while. He hasn't been competing in them every single race, so he's probably a little bit tentative.
I look forward to seeing the battle between Greipel and Cavendish. Next up, Healthy Living Tips brought to you by Target, and we're joined by Dr. Mitch Anderson.
Well, post-exercise, the most important thing is recovery and getting ready for the next race or the next training session. Now, we see it after all the cycling events, Mitch, that riders are getting a bottle of something. Is it carbohydrates or is it protein? What's the most important thing?
Well, funny you say it, timing is actually the most important thing. So, obviously, the sooner you put something in your mouth, the quicker you're going to recover. So, I guess for triathletes in particular, and also for cyclists, that if you're doing an afternoon session after a morning session, or even if you're in a stage race where there might be multiple stages over the weekend, then obviously you want to recover as quickly as possible. So the timing is the crucial factor rather than necessarily the contents. So yeah, once you finish, you should have something in your hand. Now, as to what that contains, I guess it should contain fluid. That's the most important thing. And look,
why is that? Why fluid?
Well, fluid, obviously, exercise, you're usually becoming dehydrated from the sweat. Something that's really good to pick is chocolate milk, or milk anyway, a milk-related drink anyway, because it's got plenty of sodium in it. So when you're sweating, lots of sodium's coming out. Obviously, there's a lot of water coming out, and also we should be replacing some protein. And look, whey protein is a good thing to use, which comes from milk, and that helps the muscle to recover, and also some carbohydrates because you want to replace the glycogen that you've burnt. So.
There's a time frame in there as well, isn't there? For best effect, it needs to be within 20 to 30 minutes of finishing exercise?
Yeah, look, especially if you're going to be racing that very afternoon, so, or racing again. You've done damage to the muscle, so timing of the protein is crucial. So the sooner you can get protein to building the muscle back up to its original state, then the sooner you'll be recovered to perform more work.
We've seen riders also at the Tour de France. I've seen Stuart O'Grady directly after a stage grabbing a baked potato or a bowl of rice. Very plain and not very tasty.
Yep.
But that's all about the carbohydrate intake, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I think those guys take obviously a professional approach, and they would have dietitians giving them advice probably every day, as you'd know. Yeah. Probably less back in the day and more nowadays. Yeah, look, I think something that contains a lot of carbohydrate, because you're burning a lot of glycogen. And when you actually damage the muscle membrane, it leaks. It can leak not just sodium or your electrolytes, but also can leak things like glucose. So the last thing you want to do is having that loss. So you need to be replacing that in your system when your cells are a bit leaky. So helping the membranes to close up again and recover.
Well, it sounds like the last couple of seasons of my career, I was leaking right to the very end, I think. So I guess, look, protein or carbohydrates really depends on what the next session is going to be and how far into the future or minutes or hours that particular session or race is.
Sure.
That's the Bike Lanes coverage of the Spring Classics concluded, but throughout the month of May, we're going to have extensive coverage of the Giro d'Italia. And Scott, you've anticipated with your shirt today.
I have, mate. I'm ready for it. I can't wait. Wiggins versus Evans versus Nibali. Hopefully it's just Evans on top in the end, but really looking forward to it.
And Paul Smith has done the design. Will, you happy with his work on this jersey?
I would say it's not his best ever work in the fashion world.
He's stuck with pink.
Yeah, it was an easy decision, wasn't it? He just had to do one thing, and that was put his little marks on the end.
Both of you guys have lived in Italy, raced in Italy, so looking forward to your insights throughout the month of May. Well, the Giro d'Italia throughout the month of May. We're going to cover it extensively. So remember, what's on your mind? Shoot us your questions. We've come to you today from the Salford Lads Club. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Bye for now.